My smart lock stopped responding. My backup keycard didn't work, and taped to my front door was a letter saying my access had been revoked by someone who doesn't own the house. Turns out the HOA just declared war on a cybersecurity engineer. Jason Reed knew something was off the moment he pulled into his driveway and saw the glint of dull metal on his front door. Not the sleek brushed aluminum of his custom-installed smart lock, but the kind of scratched-up deadbolt you'd find on a bathroom stall in a gas station that hadn't seen a mop since Y2K. He stepped out of his car slowly, eyes narrowing as he approached. Where the keypad used to be was now an uneven patch of metal, surrounded by drill marks and a crooked lock that hung slightly to the left like it was embarrassed to be there. Taped dead center on the door was a letter printed on HOA letterhead and sealed with a sticker of a tree. Maple Creek's proud symbol of suburban control, disguised as natural harmony. The notice was titled in all caps, "Access to Premises Suspended, Pending Violations Review." Jason blinked. Suspended? He lived here. He wasn't renting. He wasn't squatting. He had a deed with his name on it, signed and notarized, sitting in his filing cabinet, ironically, right behind the now accessible door. He skimmed the rest of the letter, jaw tightening. It was vague, full of legal-sounding nothing, non-compliant external features, unauthorized infrastructure, community safety hazard. It was signed by Karen Randall, acting HOA chairperson. The title alone was a red flag. Jason had moved to Maple Creek precisely because it didn't have an active HOA. Apparently, that had changed. He took a step back, scanned the windows. Blinds shifted across the street. Someone was watching. Someone always was in these neighborhoods. But today, it wasn't curiosity, it was guilt. Whoever it was had seen it happen. The lock, the drill, the letter taping. Jason felt his pulse slow instead of rise. He didn't yell. He didn't call the police. He didn't even knock. That would be what they expected, a frustrated tech guy throwing a fit on his porch. But Jason had spent the last decade designing systems for the kind of people who like to break them. Politicians, corporations, occasionally petty tyrants with clipboards. He inhaled through his nose, exhaled slowly, then turned on his heel, walked back to his car, and opened his laptop. The dashboard of his home network flickered to life. No surprise, the main feed was offline. Whoever did this had killed the surface-level systems. But Jason didn't build surface-level systems. He built layers, and unless someone knew where to look, they'd never know what was still running. He clicked into his secondary control grid, encrypted 3 ways from Sunday, and checked the last backup timestamp. It was intact, and it included audio. His eyes scanned the waveform preview and saw a familiar spike. Someone had spoken loudly, directly in front of the door. He minimized the window, leaned back in his seat, and smiled like a man who'd just watched the first domino tip. This wasn't an inconvenience. This was an opening. Karen thought she'd locked him out, but what she'd really done was invite him in. With a calm click, Jason began recording a new file. He titled it Phase 1, HOA Karen. Karen Randall had once been a mid-tier accountant for a pharmaceutical company that went under due to inventory irregularities, a phrase she now wore like a merit badge. Retirement didn't suit her well, so she redirected her precision and passive aggression into the only environment that allowed unchecked authority with no formal training, the cul-de-sac. When the original HOA board dissolved after a messy disagreement over mailbox paint shades, Karen declared herself the acting chair, printed her own business cards, and began what she called a beautification initiative. Most people called it something else, dictatorship. One of her first decrees banned pickup trucks from parking in driveways longer than 3 hours, citing visual obstruction of suburban tranquility. The rule conveniently excluded her own niece's Subaru, which parked in front of her house every weekend while she dog-sat a pug named Winston. Karen also attempted to get Jason's solar battery unit removed, calling it an unsightly hazard and potential radiation threat in her newsletter. The battery, of course, was UL certified and concealed behind a faux hedge panel that Jason had custom built. But facts were rarely welcome at Karen's HOA table unless they were laminated, color-coded, and hand-selected from her own version of reality. Jason had ignored her letters half out of principle, half out of mercy. But this wasn't a letter. This was a break-in, a physical, deliberate invasion masked as governance. And that meant the rules had changed. He wasn't just dealing with a bored neighbor anymore. He was dealing with a hostile actor using community bylaws as camouflage. He replayed the moment in his head, the lock, the sign, the smug HOA seal printed off an inkjet printer that probably still had a coupon taped to the top. He needed evidence, not emotion. Fortunately, he was the kind of man who always backed up his networks in triplicate. Jason loaded the encrypted drive from his backup server and pulled up the surveillance footage. The primary feed was scrambled, cut off midday. But the secondary feed, buried inside his irrigation system control panel, was pristine. The camera was hidden behind the slats of a wooden fence post and angled directly toward the porch. At 2:14 p.m., a white van with no markings pulled into his driveway. A woman in a beige windbreaker stepped out, clipboard in hand, and began pacing the lawn with a sense of authority typically reserved for border agents or reality show judges. Jason didn't need a zoom to recognize the walk. Karen Randall, in full HOA regalia, was inspecting his flower beds like they were smuggling contraband. Moments later, a man exited the van, toolbox in hand. Karen pointed directly at Jason's smart lock, miming instructions. The audio feed, faint but functional, picked up her voice. Disable the keypad first. Don't leave wires exposed. And make it look legal enough so he can't sue. Jason paused the video, zoomed in. Karen's face was smug, composed, an expression she wore like a second skin. She believed she was in control. She believed she had won. Jason leaned back in his chair, eyes reflecting the frozen image of her finger midpoint. "Let's see how legal you look when the footage hits a courtroom," he murmured. Then he smiled. The game had begun. Jason didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to. The adrenaline of technical warfare ran cleaner than caffeine. After confirming the video and audio feeds, he transferred every byte of data time-stamped, geotagged, watermarked to a drive labeled Karen_1. Then he duplicated it to a cold storage vault, a cloud mirror, and a failsafe backup located on a Raspberry Pi duct taped behind his laundry machine. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. You don't let a clipboard tyrant with a messiah complex and a history of printer fraud get a second chance to cover her tracks. By sunrise, Jason was standing in his driveway with a coffee mug and a small black device that looked like a weather sensor. It wasn't. It was a directional honeypot disguised as a lawn monitor, complete with a fake HOA sticker for irony. He powered it on and gave it the most tempting name he could think of. HOA_admin_access. A weak signal, no password. The kind of thing that screamed, "I don't know what I'm doing, please hack me." It was bait, but not just any bait. Bait with teeth. Every connection attempt would be logged, fingerprinted, geolocated, and stored. If Karen, or one of her digitally ambitious minions, bit, they wouldn't just trip a wire, they'd light up the whole board. By midday, flyers started circulating on the neighborhood app. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to address what she labeled ongoing violations of trust and visual integrity. Jason read the list with mild amusement: unauthorized drone deployment, military-grade surveillance equipment, and the best one, signal interception nodes with potential to disrupt pacemakers. He almost choked on his sandwich. His backyard router apparently now threatened cardiac health. Karen had taken creative liberty and weaponized paranoia with all the finesse of a Facebook uncle in a conspiracy rabbit hole. At 3:22 p.m., the honeypot pinged. A connection request appeared, originating from a tablet within 100 feet of Jason's driveway. The device ID, K_Randall_admin. It even had a profile name. Jason snorted. She hadn't even changed the default broadcasting signature. The system registered 3 probing attempts, default credentials, followed by a dictionary attack that failed almost immediately. Then she clicked on a file Jason had placed deliberately in plain view, master_passwords DCA. It was a dummy file, loaded with junk code that mimicked access attempts while silently logging the intruder's MAC address and behavioral pattern. Karen had taken the bait. Jason sat at his desk, watching the logs roll in like a digital confession. Every click, every keystroke, every second she spent poking around a fake network was another nail. And the best part? Her tablet's OS hadn't muted the microphone. Jason's embedded script activated the audio channel the moment she opened a decoy folder. He didn't get much, just muffled shuffling and one crystal clear line. Let's see if this shuts him up. Jason leaned back and cracked his knuckles. Nah, Karen, he whispered. This just got fun. Jason had seen sloppy digital fraud before, but this was artless. While scanning the HOA archive portal, yes, even Maple Creek's HOA had a digital footprint, he found the emergency resolution that allegedly authorized the lock replacement. It had 3 votes, all supposedly from different board members, but something didn't sit right. The timestamps were identical, down to the second, set 12:47 and 32 p.m. on a Sunday. No delay, no staggered response, just one clean, machine-perfect line. Jason tilted his head. Either these people had achieved telepathic bureaucracy or someone was playing cut and paste with governance. He opened the email headers linked to each vote. 2 of them came from addresses ending in @HO1/HCO, a domain that didn't match the official @MapleCreekOA.CWA used for all prior communication. Curious, Jason ran a Who's lookup on the suspicious domain. The result made him choke on his coffee. The registration email was pupperdelightsavings88@email.com, a throwaway account used to receive dog treat coupons. He recognized that name immediately. Karen had once bragged on Nextdoor about how she never pays full price for Winston's Chewies. Jason opened an old thread, and there it was. Same username, same dog, same Karen. She'd forged official voting records using her discount dog email. The deeper Jason dug, the worse it got. The spoof domains were hosted through a free web service, the kind favored by scam artists and amateur spammers. DNS records pointed back to a residential IP block. Same neighborhood, same router cluster, same subnet as Karen's house. He layered that on top of his honeypot logs and matched one particular intrusion attempt to a device labeled Dylan iTab. Karen's son, a former coding bootcamp dropout who once advertised his services as a freelance encryption expert, but used Comic Sans on his website. The logs told a story. Dylan had tried logging into Jason's honeypot 3 times using a brute force script called door_override GS. Not only did he fail, but he also triggered a dummy alert that redirected him to a fake admin dashboard loaded with trackers. His IP was logged, his MAC address captured, his click path, comically erratic, recorded in full. Jason watched the playback like it was a slow-motion comedy. Dylan typed like a man swatting flies, searching for files that didn't exist, and commenting out lines of code that didn't do anything. It wasn't hacking, it was button-mashing cosplay. Jason knew it was time to escalate. He zipped the files, video logs, spoofed domain registrations, metadata trails, connection attempts, and labeled the folder Project Garden Snake. Then he fired off an encrypted email to Riley Kessler, an old friend from college and now a forensic analyst who frequently audited HOA election fraud and cybersecurity breaches. Within 5 minutes, Riley replied with, "Oh, hell yes, I live for this kind of petty crime. I'll have a full report in 48 hours. For free, for fun." Jason smirked. Karen had built herself a digital empire with duct tape, dog coupons, and delusions of grandeur, and now he was about to bulldoze it. One corrupted time. Jason didn't knock. He walked straight into the HOA clubhouse at precisely 6:00 p.m., the hour listed on the flyer Karen had posted on the community board titled Emergency Compliance Review. He was early. The room smelled faintly of off-brand lemon cleaner and expired printer ink. 2 foldable tables, 4 chairs, and a single sad ficus in the corner gave the space the warmth of a DMV waiting room. Lindsay, the newest and youngest board member, barely 25 and perpetually over-apologetic, sat hunched over a folder labeled Agenda. She flinched when Jason walked in. "I just see the meeting minutes," Jason said, voice calm, hands empty. Lindsay blinked. "From the vote," he added. "The one where you all allegedly authorized forced entry into my home." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked toward the hallway like someone might save her. No one did. I didn't vote on anything," she whispered finally. "Karen said it was emergency protocol, that she had the authority." Jason raised one eyebrow. "And you didn't ask to see the vote log?" Lindsay looked down. She said it was handled. I didn't want to cause waves. Jason reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a crisp printed copy of the HOA's own bylaws, highlighted, annotated, tabbed. He laid it on the table like a professor slapping down a final exam. Page 14, Section 2.3b. Emergency access to private property requires a minimum of 3 live signatures at a called meeting. Not email votes, not clipboard nods, real people in a real room with documentation. He flipped to another page. And this so-called violation, the one about unauthorized infrastructure, that clause only applies to commercial properties. He paused. Unless you're ready to tell me my cat's solar-powered water bowl is running a black market. The silence in the room thickened. Jason gathered his papers and stood up. I'm filing a formal complaint with the county, and if Karen's got any plans to Xerox her way out of it, she might want to know that her voting emails came from a domain tied to a pet food discount account. Lindsay let out the faintest gasp. It sounded like relief, or maybe it was betrayal finally clicking into place. On his way out, Jason passed Mr. Halverson, the retired engineer who'd lived on Maple Fern Lane since the Reagan administration. The old man leaned on his cane and gave Jason a nod that felt older than the HOA itself. About damn time someone stood up to her, he muttered. You know, she fined my wife $30 because our cucumber trellis was angled aggressively toward the sidewalk. Jason blinked. Wasn't it for garden aesthetics? Halverson shook his head. Nope. Karen said it violated vegetable boundary protocols. My wife's diabetic. It was the only spot with morning sun. Jason couldn't help but chuckle. I'm guessing that wasn't in the bylaws either. Halverson grinned. Son, the only law Karen follows is the one where she wins. Jason didn't need a megaphone, he needed a thumbtack. At exactly 7:45 a.m., he walked up to the community bulletin board outside the Maple Creek Mail kiosk, where residents usually posted flyers for lost pets, babysitting gigs, and church bake sales, and added something new. A single sheet of paper, clean, bold font. Do you know what your HOA is really doing? Underneath was a short paragraph and a QR code leading to a public folder titled Maple Leak. Inside, evidence of falsified votes, spoofed domains, honeypot access logs, and, just for flair, a side-by-side photo comparison of a real HOA document and Karen's bootleg printout with mismatched fonts. He didn't post it on every door. He didn't spam the neighborhood app. It's just one paper, one pen. Jason believed in letting curiosity do the heavy lifting, and it did. Within 12 minutes, he got his first ping, then another, then 10. By the 30-minute mark, the download counter had passed 40. At 8:17 a.m., a message popped up from an unknown number. I'm on the board. I never voted. She lied to us. Another came through. Is this real? Because I feel sick. A third. What happens now? Jason didn't respond. Not yet. Let the information breathe. Karen, however, did respond in the worst way possible. At 10:03 a.m., the honeypot lit up again. Same iPad as before, same user ID, krandall_admin. This time, she poked deeper, opening folders marked HOA_camera_logs and resident_records. Both were fake. They triggered a chain of trackers and, more importantly, activated the honeypot's passive audio logger. Jason leaned in as the waveform danced. The mic caught Russell in her voice, low but distinct. We'll say it was a safety concern. That'll shut him down. Jason stared at the waveform, then played it back twice, just to hear the arrogance fold in on itself. He clipped the voice line, synced it with her device metadata, and layered it into a folder labeled legal_sequence_A. He then compressed the entire evidence chain, video, audio, access logs, domain records, vote tampering, and sent it to his lawyer with the subject line ready to proceed. His attorney, Monica Bell, had once worked counterfraud at a federal level. She replied in less than 10 minutes. This isn't just civil. We're looking at criminal misrepresentation, unlawful access, and procedural fraud. I'll start drafting. Jason leaned back and took a sip of coffee. The same porch Karen had tried to exile him from now echoed with the faint ping of every legal door unlocking in his favor. By noon, Jason passed the bulletin board again and noticed something had changed. Someone had added sticky notes around his flyer. One said, "Thank you." Another read, "She fined us for having a bird feeder." But the best one? A shaky pen scrawl that said, "Do cucumbers count as weapons?" Jason chuckled. The silence was breaking. And Karen? She was still trying to win a war using outdated software and community fear, but Jason had upgraded the entire battlefield. At 9:10 a.m. sharp, a white SUV with county plates rolled into the HOA clubhouse parking lot. Two officials stepped out, clipboard, ID badge, and that "I don't have time for your suburban theater" expression, worn only by seasoned inspectors. Jason watched from his porch, coffee in hand, as the news spread faster than gossip at a bake sale. A third figure emerged, a representative from the State Office of Civic Oversight, sent after Monica filed a formal motion citing procedural abuse and falsification of neighborhood governance. Inside the clubhouse, Karen was already waiting, flanked by her son Dylan and a laptop that still had a "Live, Laugh, Lockdown" sticker on the lid. The audit began with the vote logs. It ended with an open laptop containing a group chat titled HOA_strategy_plan_final_final 2. One line stood out. "If he won't leave, we make him miserable until he does." Another, "Delete the backup logs. He'll never prove it." The officials didn't have to raise their voices. Karen's face drained of color on its own. By 10:15, she was handed a printed notice of immediate suspension from all HOA duties pending further investigation. Dylan tried to object, but the inspector just pointed to a highlighted clause in the HOA charter: "Intentional manipulation of records is grounds for instant removal." No courtroom, no ceremony, just a signature. And Karen's empire froze mid-sentence. That afternoon, neighbors began gathering near the bulletin board, some with lawn chairs, others with copies of Jason's folder printed and highlighter streaked. What started as murmurs turned into a full-on town square meeting, spontaneous but inevitable. People took turns venting. Mr. Halverson talked about the cucumber citation. A single dad revealed Karen had once fined him for a garage door that blinked too slowly. One elderly couple admitted they'd paid $200, 0 cents, for a made-up permit to hang Christmas lights. By the time Lindsay stood up and publicly apologized for not pushing back sooner, the crowd clapped, not just for her honesty, but because the spell was finally broken. Jason stood quietly in the back, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. He didn't need to. Every story was a data point, every complaint a witness statement. The HOA had stopped being a system. It had become a person. Karen. And now that person was being uninstalled in real time. Monica arrived around 4 p.m. with a folder of signed affidavits and confirmed that a civil case was now officially open. Data Prep Carson Greaves issued a statement the next morning calling for a regional audit of HOA governance in light of the Maple Creek incident. Karen had wanted control. What she got was statewide scrutiny. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Jason's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. The message read, "Hi, Jason. We live in Bear Ridge. Saw what you did. Any chance you'd be willing to help us do the same?" Jason stared at the screen for a long second, then smiled. The clipboard revolution had just gone viral. Karen Randall's name was officially removed from the HOA registry on a Thursday morning, 9:03 AU Ming, exactly 2 weeks after her plan to digitally dethrone Jason backfired into a flaming legal bonfire. The document was clinical. 1 page, 4 signatures, and a closing sentence that read, "Individual permanently barred from holding any leadership role within Maple Creek HOA or its subsidiaries." Attached was a list of pending charges: data tampering, unauthorized access, falsified documents, and misuse of authority. Jason printed a copy and folded it neatly into a file he'd labeled "System Restore." By the following week, the neighborhood looked lighter, not physically, but atmospherically. People walked their dogs slower. Front porches that had sat empty for years suddenly had coffee mugs and rocking chairs again. Even the HOA newsletter changed tone, now renamed the Maple Minute. It included a joke column, pet photo contest, and a standing section called Board Transparency Log. At its center was the newly elected president, Mrs. Edna Moore, a retired school principal with a stare that could melt granite and a resume full of mediation awards. Jason had nominated her during the special election, refusing all encouragement to run himself. "I'm better with systems," he told the crowd. "She's better with people." The vote wasn't even close. Mrs. Moore's first act was to launch an online community portal where every resident could read meeting notes, propose initiatives, and appeal any citation. The second act? Reimbursing anyone who had been fined under Karen's fake violations, complete with handwritten apology notes signed by the new board. The third act? Disbanding the anonymous tip box Karen once used to report unsightly lawn chairs and aggressively festive wind chimes. She replaced it with a small suggestion bowl that read, "Got an idea? Tell us. Got a grudge? See a therapist." Jason, meanwhile, went back to his rhythm. Quiet mornings, remote work, sunset walks with his cat Pixel trailing behind like a sentient fur slipper. But one final upgrade remained. On a quiet Tuesday, he installed a new access panel beside his front door. Sleek, matte fleck, and synced to his latest voice-off system. It scanned his face, lit up in soft blue, and said, "Welcome home, Jason." He paused a moment before walking in, letting the words sink. Not just a phrase, a reclaiming. That evening, Jason stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching the neighborhood breathe again. Children biked past, neighbors waved. Someone barbecued too enthusiastically. On the far end of the cul-de-sac, Mrs. Jenkins was teaching her granddaughter how to plant tulips in recycled paint buckets. It was quiet, not HOA quiet, not clipboard policed silence, but peace, earned peace. And then he saw it. On the edge of a flower bed outside the clubhouse, tucked beneath the ceramic frog, was a clipboard, splintered, sun-bleached, and warped from weather. On top of it sat a terracotta pot with an overgrown basil plant leaning lazily toward the sun. Someone had used Karen's old symbol of power as a plant stand. Jason smiled, slow and steady. Poetic justice didn't always need headlines. Sometimes it just needed herbs and iron. Sometimes the loudest doors don't slam, they click, quietly, on your terms. Jason didn't fight Karen with shouting matches or lawn signs. He fought her with logic, patience, and receipts. That's the kind of revenge that sticks. Not petty, but poetic. In a world full of self-declared HOA tyrants with clipboards and power trips, remember this. You don't need to yell to win. You just need to know the system better than they do. So if you've ever been fined for the color of your garden hose or accused of aggressive gnome placement, know you're not alone. Drop a comment if you've met a Karen like this. Or better, if you were the Karen and you've reformed. We're curious. Like, share, and subscribe for more absurdly satisfying justice stories. And hey, keep your locks smart, your backups triple encrypted, and your basil growing on old clipboards.